I'd like to call to order this meeting of the 29 Palms Planning Commission for February 20th, 2024. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Cure?
Here.
Commissioner Garcia?
Here.
Commissioner Pahana?
Here.
Vice Chair Walker?
Here.
Chair Khrushchev?
Here.
All present?
Announcements. These proceedings may be viewed on demand on the City of 29 Palms website at www.29palms.org. You may also live stream this meeting by going to the city website and clicking on the meeting agendas link. Public comments. This is the time for the public to address the Planning Commission on issues within the jurisdiction of the Commission that are not on the agenda. All comments are to be directed to the Chair of the Commission and shall not consist of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain a professional, courteous decorum during their comments. There is a time limit of 3 minutes per person. If you haven't already done so, please fill out name and address slips and give them to the Planning Commission Secretary. The Planning Commission is prohibited by the Brown Act, state law, from taking action or discussing at length items not included on the printed agenda. Public comments on specific agenda items will be deferred until consideration of the item on the agenda. I've got several emails that I have in that I'll read first. We'll have a 3-minute time limit on those also. If they get too long, I'll probably have to do a summary. So under public comment, from the first one I have is from Ms. Heidi Hurd. Public comment, I'd like to speak in opposition to the proposed of land yonder project. The people that presented this project do not have their facts straight. There is no road straight to the park from the south side of their project. Traffic would have to go to the west on Sullivan to the IC Road, and this would be creating a busy intersection at one of the main ingress-egress to the neighborhood. They have also destroyed the land and have possibly crushed the burrows of desert tortoises, and even though they are claiming to of the land, they also do not understand our quiet desert, and even a small amount of ambient noise can travel on our still quiet evenings. And a movie screen, like that isn't going to ruin our night sky. They are still using their tactic of divide and conquer by soliciting city leaders and leaving their propaganda in local businesses. They have finally sent out postcards for a meeting next week. The card was not specific as to whether it is another community meeting or a meeting with residents of the neighborhood. I hope that the city leaders remember to listen to their constituents and voting residents over outside investors. Just because it's not in the backyard of our city leaders doesn't mean it needs to be in the backyard of other residents of the city. Please stop letting Indian Cove be forgotten stepchild of the city. We are already one of the main STR hotel districts. Indian Cove is a neighborhood, not a commercial district. And let me see, I've got another, do I have another? Nope, that's on item 2. Excuse me a minute, I just need to sort through all of these. Okay. Oh gosh. Is this, okay. Item 2, that goes over here. Item 2, that goes over here. Okay. And we have a public request from Cindy Bernard.
Hi, 2 things. First of all, I think since Heidi wrote that on the Yonder Offland project, I wrote Luke Searcy. And in fact, it is a community meeting, and in fact, they're not going to advertise it. And they are focusing that meeting supposedly on Indian Cove residents this time, finally. And I also, of course, at this point, still opposed to that project. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I want to talk about sort of the 29 sculpture, but not so much that I don't think it shouldn't be moved, but I do think that we have a problem with Freedom Plaza in that I'm not sure that whatever the plans were for the organization of that space for public use, I'm not sure they were ever executed or if they were ever even professionally planned. And what I'm against is plopping more things down in that space without having a landscape architect come in or a professional come in and work out a design to make that space truly pleasurable and accessible to the public in a way that we can all enjoy it. Because right now, it's not so great. And I think that if we continue to just put benches down wherever or put sculptures down wherever, it's just going to continue to be a piecemeal mess. And we really want a real public space and a real plaza. And that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you. Next, I have Susan Peplow, public comment.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to take an opportunity to talk to you about the status of the Good Neighbor class and where we're at with that. With the help of Katrina, it looks like we are at about a final count of 13 remaining on the renewals, 6 of which are registered for the upcoming class. And I also wanted to just, kind of in light of what Keith's report's going to be later today, I wanted to take an opportunity to remind you that let me see what I wrote here. Oh, that many of the topics that Keith is going to talk about kind of on that violations sheet there, lighting standards, overcrowding, parking, trash collection are quiz questions that are presented post-class. And that quiz results are totally available to Chris or whomever needs them for staff if that's going to be helpful for during like violation investigations. And that, of course, we always welcome input to any specific questions or topics that you would like to cover during the last of these renewals and then any future new licensees as well. So just a little recap on where we're at with that class. And then in other news, it's been brought to my attention, I wanted to share that there is a community member who's feeling exceedingly frustrated that there's been multiple reports, supposedly through CitizenServe, that they are not receiving a response back. And when they check CitizenServe, it may not show like any update. I'm not the person doing it, so I don't know how that's supposed to exactly view, but it's like no status change. And so it's frustrating for this individual and feeling they're not putting in more subsequent requests because they feel like it's a dead end. And I happen to know that this is a valid issue that's happening. I'm just not the one that's submitting the issue. And I just wanted to share that that's frustrating for community members. And I heard somebody else who had actually sat up there previously was sharing something similar to City Council a couple months ago, that they didn't feel like they were really getting the response that they should be to letters and CitizenServe and that. So just wanted to bring that up, that submissions aren't feeling validated. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody else who would like to make a public comment? And could I ask everybody just to turn off their cell phones or put them on silent? Thank you. Then I close public comment. And I move to commission comments and reports of meeting attended. Why don't we start at this end, Alex?
These last couple weeks I've been extremely busy, so I haven't attended any meetings. So,
Mr. Walker?
I have not attended any meetings as well.
Ms. Cure?
I attended the special T-bid meeting.
Thank you.
I have not attended any meetings since our last.
And I also have not attended any meetings since our last meeting. Thank you. We'll move on to the consent calendar. We have the housing element annual report. And I'll turn it over to staff.
This is a consent item. This is a report that we have to give up to the State Housing and Community Development Department. It's our building permit activity. So last year we had 27 new dwelling units. And if you look, that's still way, way, way under, if I can find it, what our target of like, was it some 1,000 or so, but 27 last year. So what we're asking the planning commission to do is approve this report. We send it off to the city council for their approval, and then we send it off to the state.
Do I have any questions from staff? I have one. I mean, you're right. I looked at that and I saw that we had to have 989 within the next 6 years. That's 165 units that we'll never hit. Do we just issue a new report? Do they come back and reevaluate? I mean, is there any?
Right, at the end
Yeah.
of this cycle, which is 2029, then we have to go through this exercise again and reevaluate again as to what our housing goals are.
Okay, thank you. That's the only question I had. At this time, I'd like to open it to public comment on item number 1. If I have no comments, I will now close public comment. Do I have any more discussion from the commission for the staff? If not, do I have a motion and a second?
I motion that we forward the housing element annual report to city council.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Cure,
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia,
Aye.
Commissioner Pahana,
Aye.
Vice Chair Walker,
Aye.
Chair Kruschat,
Aye.
5-0 approved.
Thank you. We have no items to remove from the consent calendar. I'll now move to public hearings. We have special occupancy parks, and I'm going to ask that staff deliver its report.
Okay, so this originally intended to be one of the cleanup items that we've been doing in the last year and a half of the development code. And as soon as this came up, more information became available to us. We had some additional feedback from various sources. We've had 2 previous meetings on this in September and November of last year. The commission asked us to research other jurisdictions to see what their regulations are. We have not found anything in California, and particularly local, let alone California. Did come to our attention. There's a mountainous community up in Colorado that allows commercial campgrounds, but it's one campsite for 5 acres. So we had a hard time finding relevance between their regulations and ours. Generally speaking, campgrounds are managed by federal, state, or county agencies. The Joshua Tree National Park is a prime example of that. The feds own and run it. So in our view, commercial campgrounds are not an appropriate use in the residential zones, and probably not in the city as a whole. So our recommendation is that we remove that commercial campgrounds from that particular portion of the development code that lumps it in with RV parks, because we think they're 2 totally separate, different animals. RV parks would be allowed in the tourist, commercial, and public zoning districts. There's one RV park in town over by the golf course. Previously, just as a background, the commission we discussed this chart here. We believe that this is probably too complex and too many levels of permitting for something that probably isn't appropriate in residential zones anyway. So we're seeking for direction here. So if the commission agrees with our recommendation that we should prohibit outright commercial campgrounds in the city, we will come back with a development code amendment. We will fine tune it and bring it back as another public hearing. Or if the commission has any other direction, we will take that direction as far as our proposed development code amendment as well. So again, we're not asking for a final decision today. We're asking for direction. So
I understand.
that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Questions from the commission for staff? I have one. Can you go back to that chart? And I just want to, I know it's a busy chart, but when you go down to amenities, Okay, above that you have screening, you've got not required for low impact, and you've got not required for drive, then you've got amenities, you've got high impact allowed, and then you've got low impact no. That means no amenities are not required. Okay, go to your middle column.
Yeah, so the discussion last time was that amenities would be required in high impact camping areas. Low impacts would be one space per 5 acres with a minimum of 5 acre gross. So that you're looking at 5 campsites, or the idea there is it would have been very small campgrounds.
Yeah,
So therefore, amenities wouldn't be allowed. But then we're looking at other things such as, trash and
right, trash receptacles.
and all those other things that would be probably too much of a not consistent with the residential neighborhood that is allowed in now.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask my question again. So is no means not required, or
That's
no
correct.
means don't have any?
As in, they wouldn't be required.
They wouldn't be required, so it should be not, okay. Same with, okay, thank you.
So again, we're asking that this was discussed last
I
time.
understand, and I know, and I got your recommendation.
Yeah.
I got that. I just wanted to make sure I understood the chart.
Sure,
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you. Do I have any other questions, Commission, for staff? Before I open it for public hearing? Then I'll open it for public hearing. And let me go to our item 2. Item 2. We got several on that. Public comment.
I have the existing development code on the screen if we need to discuss it for any reason.
All right. Okay, let me read into. I'm going to head and read into. Here we have an email from Mr. Michael Rosenor from Hip Camp. I'll going to restrict it to 3 minutes. He's grateful for the continued work on camping regulations for 29 Palms, though I was confused to see the assertion in the staff report that no counties besides Chaffee County, Colorado, allowed for camping on private lands. On the contrary, many counties, even within California, have regulations to this end, and at least 10 are currently considering legislation to update their codes in this regard, including Santa Cruz, Santa Barbara, Nevada, and Mendocino counties. I wanted to send along some development standards from other counties to you for reference. I'm also including below a list of development standards I think 29 Palms could consider while discussing their own camping regulations. These come from Calaveras County, San Luis Obispo County, Henderson County in North Carolina, and Tillamook County in Oregon. Here are some options to consider for 29 Palms to consider. Bathrooms, human waste must be appropriately managed. Setbacks, campsites must be 100 feet from property lines. Roads, if camping is an incidental use and is secondary to a residence or agricultural property, and then water access. Hope this helps. Thank you, Micah Rosenor. And then I have one from Mr. John Talley Jones. Members of the Planning Committee, I would like to comment on the consent calendar item regarding special occupancy parks. It is my hope that the Planning Commission will heed the recommendation of city staff and disallow commercial campgrounds in the city, most emphatically in residential zones. The staff report cites public health issues of poor sanitation, lack of water services, etc. There would also be more administrative overhead and increased requirement for code enforcement and even the potential for disaster. I speak from the perspective of a resident who this weekend found a fresh campsite and a new fire pit on private property within the National Park buffer zone, less than half mile from my house. One bad decision or a stiff breeze could have devastated the area. Thank you for your time. And then the third email I have is from Ms. Heidi Hurd. I would like to speak in support of the staff's recommendation that commercial camping, campgrounds, glamping sites not be allowed within the city limits and that the development code be amended to reflect this. I applaud staff for recognizing that these types of activities are not appropriate in residential zones. I support confining RV parks and other commercial campgrounds to the commercial, tourist, and public zones. Okay. That goes over to item 3. And now I have for item number 2, Ms. Gretchen Grunt.
I just wanted to echo again, thank you for realizing that this is probably a bad thing to support. And I think my letter I read last meeting was covered what needed to be covered, so thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, Mr. Douglas Cooper.
I just want to say that those last 2 emails you received are exactly the same stance I have. To have camping in a residential neighborhood is just asking for complaints and code enforcement, and it's going to be a nightmare. And I'm sure, as most of the residents in the city would appreciate the privacy that they moved here for or have been here for years. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Cindy Bernard.
Yeah, I'm also seconding. I'm just, I was so happy to read your staff report, guys. It's like so relieved. As someone that lives on 40 acres, I'm lucky to live on 40 acres and be surrounded by lots of empty parcels. I have a massive fear of fire where I live. I live a half mile from the park border. And all I could think of was people, camping on those parcels and deciding to start a campfire, not understanding the winds here, and then suddenly everything's on fire where I live. So I really applaud staff on this one for realizing it's really not a good idea in residential zones. It's probably not a good idea in the city as a whole. I also wonder, hearing what Hip Camp just wrote, I also wonder whether Hip Camp really understands the nature of a lot of our empty parcels, most of which do not have water run to them, most of which do not have sewer, most of which don't even have roads, that you'd have to cross someone else's property to get to the empty parcel to camp on. So I'm not sure that when they're writing us, they actually understand the situation with so many of the empty parcels that we have here in the first place. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody else for a public comment on this item? Then I close public comments. And I'll open it for commission discussion. Does the commission have questions for staff? I have a concern because we even had a person that talked about illegal camping, a person that just comes and plops down, and I've witnessed this in my area. And I know that the park is always expanding, and they get filled up fast, and when people can't find a place, then they'll go someplace else, and it's usually, it doesn't matter if we have a regulation or not. They're gonna plop down and do it, and of course, they're breaking the law or violating our ordinances, but I don't know if, I like the idea of having it either in, would you have commercial, tourist, and I agree, not in residential areas or rural living, but maybe finding a place, because we've got areas on the route up to Utah Trail that I know people have expressed an interest in a commercial campground that, because
Right.
we do have overflow from the park.
Right, so,
And I'm not asking the city to build it. I mean, you're right. It's usually state and federal, they run those. But there are commercial campgrounds, so that would be my question,
right, so let me, if I can bring this up.
yeah.
Got too many things open here. Okay. So what we can show you here, we've developed, our technology is ever evolving. So,
Yes, I understand.
so this right here, in the pink, that's commercial tourist zones.
Okay,
So we're not bringing up any other zones. Okay, this is commercial tourist. Okay, up there in Amboy, down in Utah, and over by the Oasis, and there's some spots over by Lorea.
yeah.
Okay, and there's a spot right there. Without knowing every single parcel, but that's generally what we're talking about.
Okay,
As it's written now, especially the RL, And I forget what other zones that were listed. In public. Well, I'm looking at what it's, okay, so if we're to go, what we're recommending as far as where it would be allowed, if we were to go down this path, let me get rid of these, and I'll go public. So that's where commercial campgrounds could go. Okay?
That's commercial tourists
Commercial, tourist, and public.
and public, yeah.
If we get rid of public, that's where they would be limited to. Okay?
All that green space in there?
Oh, no,
No.
no, just the pink,
those, just those.
just the pink.
Oh, just the pink. Go back up to Utah Trail, and let me see. All right. No,
And
that's not enough.
this is the location of the existing RV park.
Okay.
And, yeah, so we'd still have, I mean, there's nowhere that's not residential in this
Yeah,
town.
there's no place that they're not butting up against a residential area, so that we've got no places out in the, where you would want a campground. You want it out in the open, okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Gold Park?
so basically, they would have to go outside the city limits if they wanted to do it.
Or
And
they
then
would,
deal with the,
or if they had and I'm just supposing here, or if we go down this path and someone wanted to put a campground, say over here somewhere, again, just making stuff up for scenario purposes, we would require them to come in with a zone change general plan amendment to go to commercial tourist.
So it would have to be approved at that time anyways, right?
So so by doing that, that would mandate a planning commission hearing and a city council hearing.
I'd like to find a way that we could give somebody an option, but we have the final call. The city has the final call on, yes, that's something that will work, or that's something that won't work. So, I mean, what would we have to say? Just say, well, it's only allowed in a special district? Or,
Well, that's what zoning is. I mean, that's.
well, I know, I
yeah.
understand that, but what I'm saying is, if we're not gonna put it, or if we're, see, somebody could come in, if we say commercial tourism, it opens up all those areas that we're saying, no, we don't want it right next to a residential area. And I understand that. But I'm trying to figure out a way to, and help me out here, to find an area that's away from the residential, but still provides an opportunity for somebody to put in a commercial campground, so we have a place for overflow to go, rather than camping illegally. Am I,
No, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
If we were to go down this path of only allowing it in commercial tourists, for instance, we would have to come up with some pretty stringent development standards. This is to say you have to be X amount of feet distance away from the nearest residence or the property line or something.
right, and they still have to go through the CUP process,
So
it
so have
can-
to
yeah.
go through a CUP process.
That's what I'm saying, is they can still come in and it can be, okay. That would be my thought. I'll let the rest talk.
It's the staff's recommendation to only do commercial tourists?
It's our recommendation to not allow commercial campgrounds at all.
Oh, not at all. Okay, this was just a for instance for
This is a for
scenario
instance,
purpose.
if the commission does not agree with us, that should be
Like
prohibited.
what other zones would we consider
But
them?
what other zones could be considered?
And here's a snapshot of the commercial tourism, got it.
This is, these are the only places in town where there's commercial tourists. And
A lot of them are just where the hotels are, right? Or,
that's
yeah.
commercial tourists, that's the idea, that people come in and have the hotels and whatever, and.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if it can be, can we research something? I know this is not a decision, and I agree, not in residential areas, but is there a, we make the requirement stringent enough that we have control that it's away from tourist areas? So if it is, okay, we start out, boom, I chose this commercial tourist, and we say that, yeah, but it's not, half mile from a residential area. It has to be a half mile from a residential area. And I'm just using that as an example. And that the development code is written to that case, that, look, because again, I give it back to, does anybody else feel that way? That, if we don't have something, if we don't ask this question now, we're gonna have a lot of illegal camping?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
They're going to find a way anyways. In other
Yeah.
places, we might as well give them a place that we can regulate at the very least. I don't believe it should be in residential, but the commercial tourism, even then, if we can regulate it well enough, but I don't know, I agree.
What do those guidelines look like, though? Given these are the parcels for that, what would you, to Jim's chair's point, he was saying, well, it can't be within how many feet of residential community or house, and some of these are by that. So how could we enforce a policy, and like what would those codes look like to keep what you're asking to be applied and code enforced?
First we define the campground, and we make the most stringent requirements on the campground, a commercial campground, like the necessary amenities for human waste, water, and then it has to be, I'm going to use it again, half mile from an existing housing zone, and if you meet all these requirements, it can only be in commercial tourism, and then if somebody wants to walk in with a plan, it still has to go through the CUP process.
It also still,
Before the planning commission.
Yeah.
it also seems like some of these places aren't in residential areas. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a couple places that are hugged against areas, but
But something might already exist there. These aren't vacant.
right.
Yeah.
Well,
Some are and some aren't.
Some are, some
Right.
aren't. Yeah, it has to be vacant. I mean, what I'm asking is, I don't want to make it an arduous task, excuse me, to say, come up with here's go with something simpler. I understand. But something that provides an avenue for a commercial campground to deal with the issue of overflow from the park and the fact that we don't want people illegally camping throughout our community. Is that good guidance?
Okay, so let's do one question at
Yeah.
a time.
All right.
So, is it the commission's direction that commercial camping should be allowed in the city or not allowed in the city?
Well, that should be the first question then. How many think
Well,
it should be allowed?
It sounds like two have voiced that let's do it and have a code for it so that we can hold people accountable.
Okay, so that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So so the next question I would have is it the commission's direction that tourist commercial would be an appropriate zone for this type of activity?
Can you pull back up the RL zoning?
Yeah,
Maybe just 5 and above.
5 and above. Okay, here's 5. So that's where all that is. It's,
Are you suggesting it be allowed in rural living?
He just wants to see.
Oh, okay.
he just
I
wants to
think
see
he's
where it is.
trying to
That's fine.
strategize, meeting what you guys want the policy. Some don't even want it in our community at all. If they're gonna camp, they're gonna camp. That's what I'm hearing from two of you. So let's put it into a policy. But how many calls do we get? Do we have statistical data on how many people were having camping?
we don't have any hard data, but it's regular. I would say, at least once or twice a week.
Are they camping illegally because they can't find a spot or just because they want to? You know?
It's
Well,
usually
Like affordability, you mean?
It's usually
Yeah.
the park's full,
Because-
or, yeah, they're just saying, okay, I see an empty space in the desert.
So
I mean, that's what I found around my property, is like people just plop their trailer and stop and,
well, some of the ones that we
Yeah.
get is people that just do what he says, not because they have even gone to the park. They
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
want to do their own
Same
thing.
thing.
Other ones have done it that we found through Hip Camp, which
Yeah.
they have solicited and found a place that's being rented. They actually pay a fee for them.
Like a homeowner
Yeah.
rents out their backyard.
Exactly.
Understood.
Up empty parcel. We've had people also that have gone on Craigslist and listed a parcel, and that so happened was the parcel right next to Starbucks. And we came in one day and there were 6 tents there. It was obviously a hoax. These people actually paid somebody through Craigslist and were able and thought
See,
that they were
yeah.
legally camping, but they weren't,
I mean-
because the parcel didn't
So
belong to
how do
them.
you, does
So
having
we can
commercial
deny,
tourist
we can
camp
deny commercial
change that?
campground. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So we have everything from, and not once that we've encountered someone that's camping have they said that they didn't have a space at the park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That has never been part of the conversation. They never said they were going to the park and didn't have a space.
Yeah, well, and the thing about it is, okay, we say, yeah, that's it, no commercial camping in 29 Palms, the city limits. That's not gonna stop people from illegally. So that's why.
No, but we can cite them for it.
Yes, but that's right, you can cite them for it.
Does
Keep-
that answer
And
your
if they're in
question?
an area that's not designated for it, yeah, we can still cite them.
On this map, can you show the National Park Buffer Zone?
That hasn't been programmed in yet. But in general, what it's based,
Yeah.
I'm doing a rough line here because I
Yep.
don't have it all, because
Yep.
it jigs and jags a little bit. But it's basically this line south, and then it roughly follows over here, and then comes up this way, and then avoids the Hanson track.
So if in the ordinance, we said rural living is fine, but not within a mile of the National Park Buffer Zone, that then takes Indian Cove all the way out of the conversation.
No, if you have it in rural living, they can come up to like a 2.5, 2.5.
No, rural
And-
living 5, which is all the words what we're seeing right now, but Indian Cove is all this yellow right here by the park. So we say not within a mile of the park buffer zone, which basically brings it down to closer to the highway and towards the base.
But your recommendation is that we allow commercial camping within rural living.
Yes, but not within a mile of the National Park Buffer Zone.
I'd rather not have it, yeah.
It's,
I'd rather not have it in rural living. I mean, I'd rather find areas
Cindy,
for it.
it's not public comment, please.
It's not public comment.
But that Indian Cove is where we get the complaints from for everything, right? For the VHRs, because they're saturated, they have a lot of stuff going on there. So if we say rural living is fine for if you want to open up a commercial tourist, but can't be within a mile of the park buffer zone.
Well, even if we restrict it to commercial tourism or commercial tourists, we meet that requirement. And, you know, I don't want to be flooded with commercial campgrounds throughout 29 Palms, but I do want to give like an opportunity for a decent commercial campground to come in to deal, so people have a place to go if there's an overflow in the park, or an opportunity for that.
But we require a CUP for all campgrounds.
Right.
And if we don't like what they're presenting to us, they don't have
Okay.
a good plan, they
Well-
don't have established amenities and everything else, they don't have water.
Right.
They don't have human waste facilities, then we deny the CUP.
Yeah, well, that's fine, but I also wouldn't,
But there's just
I
not
wouldn't put
enough,
it in rural living.
there's not enough space in commercial tourist to do it. Or we could require them
All
to submit to get it rezoned from rural living 5 to commercial tourism.
Yeah, okay.
But then we have zones all over the place with kind of pockets of commercial tourism within all kinds of other zonings.
Yeah, so.
I think we've all,
I might put another suggestion here. There's other zones here besides RL. There are other commercial zones here. You have service commercial, commercial office, neighborhood commercial is probably not appropriate, commercial general. You know, that's the most permissive of all the commercial zones. So if the commission's looking for other possibilities, we could expand it into these other commercial areas
right.
I'm gonna
as opposed to
disagree.
an RL.
Right, I'm gonna disagree with the residential area.
Same.
And I think that, and this isn't just to create like sides up here, but it's just to have the discussion and talk through it. And I do understand holding people accountable, but there is, you know, other ways like trespassing and different ways that you can enforce that. It's just not maybe through a code enforcer, it would be through the, sheriff's department. So is the concern holding campers who are trespassing responsible, or is it to provide the facilities?
I lean more towards providing the facilities.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of accessibility for people. I don't think. I just lean towards accessibility. What that looks like, it can look like many different things.
So we have a lot of rural living around the areas that would be desirable, right? And so the suggestion from Mr. Walker is that if they do the CUP, they're asking to change that zoning to fit into whatever we're choosing as the allowable zoned area.
But they could do that now. If we say only commercial tourism is where you can do this, and somebody buys one of these big plots up by Indian Cove,
And then they
they,
come
they
in for
could submit
rezoning.
to get it rezoned to commercial tourism,
And then they come in.
put in the,
Right.
then put in the camping ground, which nobody wants.
Can you put it as commercial tourism and still
Well,
have
no,
the
you have
buffer
to
zone?
approve, you'd have to approve the rezoning, and that's the first gate.
Yes.
So they could say, no, we don't want a campground in that area. Then the second part is they get it rezoned, then they have to come in with a CUP that meets all the requirements of the, so there's a lot
Correct.
of gates they have to go
There's lots of
through.
levels they have to go through, but if we just, to alleviate them going that route, which they could do right now, we say, yes, you can do it in rural living, but not within a mile of the National Park Buffer Zone,
So that.
which
addresses
that
your
takes
concern.
out anything close to the park, takes out all of Indian Cove, takes everything and puts it towards more, less populated areas of the city. And it alleviates them having then go do a zoning change request and then do another CUP to do the commercial campground.
No, but I don't feel that, I think that's a good, that if they want to go, we make it commercial tourism, and if they want to select a place, it doesn't mean we have to approve it. I mean, you're making it sound like they come in for a request for rezoning and it's automatic. It's not.
No, I wholeheartedly agree, it's not automatic. I'm just saying,
It's actually pretty
This-
arduous.
If they come in with a request for a rezone, they have to come in with their project at the same time.
Yeah.
So we will see their project at the same time we're looking at the rezone.
Okay, you're looking for direction.
I'm looking for
And
direction.
we're obviously, we need more information. If we did a commercial tourism, just say it's commercial tourism with some very ardent restrictions, can we investigate that? And I'm not sure what they would be. A mile within residential area, I don't know what that place
And-
is.
Incorporate a buffer zone
Pardon?
and the buffer zone, what you're saying.
And keep it out of the buffer zone?
but because if we don't do that, then no matter, because let's say, Keith, we said you can't have a campground in, within a mile of the park buffer zone. Then they couldn't come and ask to rezone it to commercial tourism anyway and put a camp there anyway, right?
Correct.
Well, yeah, and the buffer zone specifically prohibits going more dense than the current zoning allows.
Right, so I think no matter what we do, if we say yes to rural living or not, we should at least put that in the ordinance that you cannot have a commercial campground within a mile of the national park buffer zone.
So
I don't know
you're
if
asking
that's
for a
even-
buffer on the buffer?
But you
a
can
buffer on
camp
the buffer,
inside
I mean-
of the national park, you just can't camp in the buffer zone. So I'm just trying to understand, isn't it for the accessibility of what the people in the park, the people who wanna camp, they're not gonna wanna go to the wilderness of 29 because that's where we said? Like, what's the purpose?
If we make it commercial tourism, they're gonna have to go to the wilderness or 29 Palms or some,
Commercial tourist as it stands now is not in the wilderness.
well, no.
Well,
but
no,
it-
I know
so
that,
But
but
they're
I
gonna have
mean-
to go quite a ways away from the park, which you're saying they're not gonna wanna do.
What we're saying is that not every commercial tourism zone would be
Suitable.
suitable because of the other requirements that would be placed
Correct,
on it.
yeah.
Okay.
I understand,
So all I'm saying is like, they're looking for direction. I'm saying, can we look at high impact only? So that means that's the most stringent. With the most stringent requirement, the only zone would be commercial tourism. And then, and then if they want to go through the arduous process of trying to rezone something, they can, or the developer can. And then that kind of restricts it to places that are within the city limits, but away from a residential area, and still allows for some form of commercial camping that is, I think, a good service for the community and for the people that visit our park, which we want to help promote. The park is getting full all the time.
So high impact meaning you're gonna have all of those amenity requirements, but they could pitch a tent in the area? Like the
Well, they may come in
developer-
and they may have a site, and the site may sit there and say, and they may pitch a tent on that site. I mean,
like however they develop it, the
Yeah.
developer develops that, but
They
with
may-
having all those other requirements.
Okay. Well, let's get some direction to staff, because it's obviously we want to relook at this one more time, because we like doing this. And, we're trying to, you know, satisfy a lot of different elements. So I make a motion, you can second it or you can't, is that we look at the only place that we allow it is in commercial tourism. We have some stringent requirements that keep it away from residential areas and keeps it out of the buffer zone. And we have more of the high-impact requirements, and it still requires a CUP. So it has to have facilities, it has to have, you know, access to water. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry, that's a long motion. All right, so that's my motion. Is it clear? I hope so.
We really just need, like, first, if each commissioner could say, clarify whether they want it in a residential zone. Each one individually, if you could just say yes or
Okay.
no, you want it as a residential zone.
So what do we do with his motion?
Well, right now, it's,
We don't
Well,
need
he made a
right?
motion, so do we
We-
just
What?
squash the motion?
Does direction require a motion? You have it listed
No.
here.
No, we don't.
Yeah,
need
I
a
didn't think so,
motion,
but so why do you have it
Okay.
listed in my order of procedure?
error on my part, sorry.
Okay,
Didn't mean to confuse you.
all right, so let's walk through and just sit there and say, keep it out of residential area. Does everyone agree with that?
No.
Yes.
Yeah,
I agree with keeping it out of residential.
I do too.
Out of residential. Out of
Out.
okay. How do we feel on restricting it to a commercial tourism with additional requirements?
Yes, to additional requirements, distances from housing or
Right.
roads, thoroughfares, yes.
But in commercial tourism now only with additional restrictive requirements. That's what I'm saying. How do we feel about that?
Yes.
I would like to see what that looks like, but
Yeah.
not,
Right, we're
not
just giving
totally in
direction.
favor, but
Right.
would like to see what that would look like.
It's not for,
Yeah,
I'd like
I
to
understand.
see what that looks like
we don't
as
have an
well.
ordinance, we're not voting on an
Even
ordinance here.
Coming up with distances from residential and a commercial, if it's right next to residence. If you're camping, you're outside. I don't know how you keep someone from not being up against the property just because the facilities are there. I don't know. I have questions.
Well, it's like you could sleep in the hotel, but you can't put your tent there. Like, it's just, or you could sleep in the house, but you can't.
So we could put setbacks on the property, that you have to be 50 feet from each property line or 75, all.
Okay.
All
Just some
all
round up numbers.
improvements
Right.
have to be 50 or 75 feet from all property lines, so that
Right.
keeps it interior.
I think we're narrowing it down. Not in residential. I think do we have a consensus that commercial tourism with additional restrictions? Okay.
Yes, we want to explore this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. If that's direction, do you guys want to continue this to a date certain, or do you want to just leave it up to staff to draft something and then re-advertise it and come back?
I think it's fine to give the staff time, unless you had a specific date in mind.
Yeah, give you some time to draft up. Can you do another study session proposal and say this is how we're seeing and then after that one, then we can move towards a ordinance?
Yeah, we can do it that way.
We're narrowing it down. I mean, I know we're chipping away at it, so
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
what I would like to do. Before
So
we start
is-
walking right into the ordinance.
So is that a motion to give the staff direction and then continue it off calendar?
Yes. Off calendar,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
It was Jim's, and then I saw Alex nod a little bit, but no words spoken.
I'll second that.
So Jim with the motion and Max with the second.
Call for
Yep.
vote, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Cure?
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia?
Aye.
Commissioner Pahana?
Aye.
Vice Chair Walker?
Aye.
Chair Krushat?
Aye.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Wow, that was, all right. Okay, now we move on to discussion of potential action items. This is a community development Community Development Director updates. Okay, we're going over the vacation home rentals violation database. This is informational for our, for everyone out there, for our audience, and go ahead.
Okay, so before I introduce our code enforcement staff, I want
Go
to
to the chat.
do a couple of words here. The reason why we're bringing this up is because the decisions in the workshop we have here could affect how we write or modify the vacation home rental ordinance. There are very explicit citations and fines in the development code, which may or may not be fit with the direction we may be going. So the city council did direct us to bring back the vacation home rental ordinance to the planning commission. But I wanted to have this discussion first because I don't want to have to go back and back and back. I'm modifying the vacation home rental ordinance again and again. So this is a very important part of that particular code. But again, before we rewrite anything in the development code, I want to make sure we're all on the same page as to what we're facing with for code violations on vacation rentals, okay? And then who's giving it? Chris? Okay, so I'll just, so I want to introduce Chris Junta, who's our one of our code enforcement officers.
Good evening. So for what we did for this report was take the past 3 years' data on all of our VHRs, and we distilled that down by complaint, the type of complaint, building violations, noise, et cetera. What are the most common ones? What are ones that may have been thought of as is going to be a problem that weren't? Noise is pretty much the number one. And if we go through here, so here's the common concerns received: noise, red tags, unpermitted improvements, and lights and trash. Red tags and unpermitted improvements kind of surprised us. That one, so they're only required to get an inspection from the building and safety every 3 years. So after that initial inspection and they've received their license and everything is above board, what they're finding at the 3-year mark or while they're on a different inspection at a neighboring property or we get a complaint through code, we're finding a lot of unpermitted work. Some of it is, sometimes the owner's a little ignorant of all our rules and regulations and they put a hot tub in without getting a permit. Okay, they get double feed and they pay the permit and everything's good. On a number of occasions, we're finding much bigger building issues. We're finding extra rooms, extra buildings, areas of the property that were not inspected for safety for the license, which are now being used as habitable spaces. Pool houses, buses, an RV in the backyard, an ADU, in one case a shed. So we're catching a lot of that in conjunction with our building department. So if we want to go to the next one. So as you can see, 183 of our cases over the past 3 years on 500 VHRs were building related. So that means that something was done without a permit. The other 53 were code complaint cases. Nope, we have it right.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's a breakdown of our violation types. So it's pretty self-evident. Noise is the big winner, and then red tags and unpermitted improvements also come in pretty high. Not every red tag, or I should say not every unpermitted improvement generates a red tag and vice versa. So there are cases where we will find something. We always let the building department know. If it gets to the level of they're not responding to us, then building department will go out and red tag it. But most of the time, if it comes in through the portal or something we observe, it generally doesn't generate a building case until they file for the actual permit. So these are our resolutions. So 31% of our complaints result in no violation. And this is for a number of reasons. We get a lot of Monday morning phone calls. Hey, Friday there was a loud party at 11:30 at night at 123 Main Street. Okay. Did you call the number on the sign? Did you call the hotline? Did you call the sheriff's department? So we have no way to verify the complaint. In that case, we do send a courtesy email to the VHR owner, just letting them know, hey, we received a complaint that there was a loud party. It's not actionable, but we just wanted to let you know, and we take it seriously. And future complaints will be investigated like any other. 25% landed in complete unverifiable, and like I said, you know, a noise complaint or a loud party or an overcrowding is one that's very, very difficult for us to enforce. We simply have no way of knowing. 7% result in a actual ticket. So it's relatively rare where we have to go all the way to issuing a citation to one of our VHR owners. For the most part, they're relatively responsive. And then non-actionable could be one where we get a lot of complaints like, there's too many cars here. Well, you know, there's 11 cars and they're only approved for 8 people. And okay, well, we don't have anything on the books that says they can't have guests, you know, during the day. They can't have some friends over, family, etc. So it's just nothing we can do to address that at that time, and they're generally after the fact complaints to begin with. Yep, and you know that's we can go to the last one. I think. There we go. So this is our violation matrix based on reoccurring complaints. So this is basically just a breakdown of how it is that the city handles complaints and violations for VHRs. So if you get a complaint and there's a verified violation, we send a nuisance letter. We give a prescribed amount of time for them to correct the violation, just like any other property. Second one, if it's for the same violation, we send them a letter and they immediately get a ticket, a citation. Property owner is still responsible for getting their property into compliance. And then the third and the fourth. And at any level at this point, should the violation in and of itself rise to the level of, okay, we may need to revoke because it's so egregious, and then we bring it to our boss, who brings it to City Council. So this piece was, so a lot of times stuff is out of the control of the host. You know, those are things we would warn, fine, suspend, or revoke for. So warning, unverified, again, like a noise that we can't lock down or too many people that we can't lock down. We still issue the warning, the courtesy letter. Those are typically where either the problem no longer exists or it's already been resolved. You know, oh, there were too many cars in the parking lot. Well, they're all gone today. They're not there. Fines are for repeated offense. And again, they can range from anything, trash out on the wrong day, you know, too many cars, too many people, etc. Suspend would be repeated occurrences of building something without a permit, construction, repeated finable activities, and then lastly would be revoked. Advertising illegal activities, advertising a VHR as a party house or an area where you could have, we had at least one ayahuasca retreat at one of our VHRs. So stuff like that where it's illegal by its very nature, we would revoke your license for that.
Sorry. What we're intending that chart to do, this is just the Excel working version of it. We're, instead of explicitly listing these in the development code, it's our opinion that this list be an active list, that when things come up, we can add it to this as an administrative policy that would be publicly available. And then we can judge, as new situations come up, we'd be able to have the flexibility to add these where we think it's appropriate, whether it's a revocation, a suspension, fine, or a warning. So this is our intended approach to handle code citations on VHRs. And then realistically, it's almost likable to almost any other kind of license. If you have a business license, and if you misbehave, you can lose your business license. Driver's license, same thing. You know, if you drive drunk or get in car accidents, you can lose your license. So we're taking the same sort of thought process here. So of course we need to be very explicit as to what it means, what will trigger a revocation or a suspension. So again, this is our thought process on handling these types of situations. And this is, we're looking for feedback for this as an administrative policy, and if the commission likes this idea, then we can include this in modifications to our development code.
Okay, then I open it up to the commission for questions for staff.
I'd like the administrative policy aspect to it available to the public. Just curious, during these times that it's happening, do we have like a cease of operations at any moment?
That is a suspension. We brought, I think it was last year, we brought two situations up here last year for a recommendation of revocation, but the commission downgraded it to suspension. As far as I know, that's the only time in the last year and a half that occurred.
Okay. So you can continue, would it just like elevate, like if you continuously got fined or warnings that would just turn into a suspend? Or, and then eventually revoke with determining how many fines were applied?
Right, and the severity of the violation will dictate where it would fall on this chart.
Okay.
And we're going to be very explicit on, beginning with renewals, we're going to start issuing conditions of approval. On vacation home rentals, they'll say you are allowed as a 4-bedroom with, however many parking spaces and et cetera. So when we send code enforcement out to do a courtesy check, if they have 6 sleeping spaces as opposed to 4, that is a violation of their conditions of approval.
Which is a revoke automatic, not a suspend of operations to be heard in front of somebody for a revoke, or just automatic?
That is something we can discuss that as well.
Okay.
But we're viewing this as an automatic but appealable of the decision to revoke.
Understood.
But we are open to direction on that as well.
Did you want to open it to public?
No, I got a few questions myself. First of all, something's non-actionable because they've complained about it to you the next day after it's, and there's no way to verify, okay, when did it happen? So what would make it actionable? That they issue a report, they have a report from the sheriff's office, or they?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, ideally, they would have called Southwest Security, which
Right.
is our weekend nighttime, and
Right.
they will go out and they'll take decibel meter readings for noise complaints. They take light
Okay.
meter readings for lightly complaints. But yes, even.
And we still
even-
have them on contract?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
And
All right.
even if there's a sheriff's department report, like, we went out at X time and there was a loud party, it's something that tells us, or, honestly, video works sometimes if it's, taken clearly and, time stamped and date stamped. We take that as evidence as well.
And
So, go ahead.
in most of these cases that you're finding, the phone number on the VHR has or has not been called. It's just kind of like, hey, I didn't call that number, but I want to let you guys know, kind of situation.
Yes, one of
Okay.
the first questions that we always asked when we do talk to the complainant is, did you actually call? A lot of them, sometimes they like, no, I didn't want to go out there. I didn't want them to see me. So a lot of times they haven't. The ones that have, actually will show us, they'll send us like a screenshot, the times they called them, and if there was a resolution or not at that time.
We are also seeing, not a lot, but a little bit of the opposite, where we have a resident that is not happy with a VHR next to their property, and they crank music to annoy the VHR guests. And we have one it's a pretty nasty ongoing feud right now.
To make it seem like that VHR is causing the noise, or just to be
Just to be
spiteful?
Spiteful.
To make the,
Understood, okay.
make the people that are, the guests to be upset, and so that they continue to get bad ratings and bad reviews. So that way, and so when we looked at the reviews, it says, a great place to stay, however,
The neighbors are,
cranking the music or being obnoxious or, you know.
Right, and there's no fine applied to them.
No.
Right.
Right.
And that particular one, we've had Southwest Security out there about a dozen times, and not once has the meter gone off over the acceptable limits. So it's-
Okay. So when I look at this chart and I see verified no violation, you've gone out, you've said, no, there is no violation. Like, yes, they are playing music, but it's before 10 o'clock. Kids are playing in the pool, but it's only 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. And we have a couple of these that are just, I can see these, some of these licensees have multiple,
Calls under the
yeah,
one
and then it's
addressing.
closed, but it's a lot of it's unverifiable, 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 verified no violation, verified no violation, verified no violation.
And this is why we want to say on, when we give citations, that we have to verify it.
Yeah.
Right, or else it could be me calling on you because I just want to have a list on your report that I call all the time about you, right?
Yeah, so we have to have proof.
Well, I'm seeing that a lot of them are just like code violations, red tag, and I don't know why somebody doesn't get it revoked for unpermitted structures.
And that's where I'm
Because-
trying to head to.
Yeah, that's what I'd like, I think that should be, yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one for us because
Yeah.
they've signed all the paperwork.
can't-
I understand all the rules and regulations. They know they need permits for X, Y, and Z, and then we walk out the door and they convert the pool house.
But an
into a
unverified
living space.
structure, that's a violation of, not the VHR, that's just a violation of our
VHR
development
period,
code.
yeah.
And the building
And our-
code as
yeah,
well.
building.
Right, so we can go back, nail them on the development code, and then use that as the
And-
reason for the revocation. Is that what you're looking for?
For those things.
So, one of the things okay, two broad questions. One,
Okay.
does the commission like this approach as far as administrative policy versus in the development code? And I can show you in the development code where this is,
Attempted.
Okay.
where it's explicit. And two, if we want to go down this path, does the structure of this make sense? Is there something that's missing here, something that needs to move from one level to another as far as initial direction?
For the inaccurate advertising, or that it contradicts, does that just mean, like, if they're saying it's 4-bedroom and it's supposed to be 3? I mean, what are
Correct.
the? Okay.
Yes.
That's correct.
That's exactly that, and we did have one other case where two VHRs that were located next door to each other were being advertised as rent both and have a big party. We have a gate in between, and so anything that advertises something either illegal or inaccurate outside of
What they're
what
permitted.
they're permitted for.
Would be a violation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So let me ask the first question first.
Yeah.
Is this approach, having this administrative policy available to the public, an acceptable way of handling VHR citations?
Yes.
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 You like that?
Yes.
As opposed to being very explicit in the development code? Okay.
But before we go there, I'd like to open it up to public comment
Okay.
if we're done. If anybody has any more questions, or you have any more questions for staff too. And then we can come back to this after okay. So I'm gonna open it to public comment. I've got another one from Miss Heidi Hurd for item 3. And I'm not gonna read the whole thing because it's gonna be over 2 minutes. But she is complaining about the fact that she has a neighbor, and she specifically has talked about file numbers, which I'll pass on to staff. She has specifically talked about a VHR that has not, She's reported that they replied and they had cameras to monitor. I informed them if they had cameras, then they should have been able to see that there were too many people, cars, illegal fireworks on the property. They just said they were talking, taking care of it. I told them that because the people can't do this sort of thing where they live, doesn't mean that they can do it, this sort of thing where we live. And she's basically complaining about VHR 100, which I saw had a bunch of listed. And,
I'm really trying not to be very specific on any one particular.
yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
I understand that that's
Gotcha.
a public comment, but I'm trying
But
to
anyways,
look bigger.
and I will pass this on to staff. Okay? Next, we have item number 3, Susan Peplow.
Thank you. I have so much, I wrote it down. And thank you for the additional information and nice presentation, Chris. Just to start, I'm going to kind of jump ahead. Personally, I think that's a little too dynamic, and keeping things simple and setting people up for success, there's some real gains for that. Some of this we already covered. Chris talked about how he essentially was just pulling this information for like the last 3 years, but you can see like on page 1, for instance, it's referencing infractions that had taken place prior to the ordinance, which is dated June 24th, 2023. So we're using a database that's not even completely accurate. And then there's also dates that are completely missing. Like we don't even know when the infractions took place or when code enforcement called on them. There's really not enough data on those sheets to really extract when and what's going on. But kind of moving forward to like the immediate issue of building a matrix. Last February, in discussion actually with Chris, it was super helpful. We learned that, just as he said, with the new 3-year safety inspection, we were finding infractions happening with like the building. So at that same time, like, I'm sorry, I wrote it down and still lost my thought. Okay, so we are finding things during the 3-year inspection, like by example. During a safety inspection, you found like a den that had been morphed into a bedroom, thus changing the maximum occupancy of the home and conditions of the license regarding the beds and accurate advertisement. With reflection now, I see that that may not have even necessarily been an issue because you're allowed 2 persons per bedroom plus an additional 2. Doesn't really say where the additional 2 needs to be, and it doesn't count if you're under 5 years old. So without knowing the answer to that example, hypothetically, let's say that we do have a change to the structure. The current policy will result in a red tag, double fine, and won't renew the VHR license until rectified. Advertising of illegal activities. Revocation seems appropriate for drugs and prostitution, but what amounts to illegal? At last spring, the school bus and travel trailer violations were referred to as illegal activities. Couldn't such circumstances trigger a safety issue resulting in a $250 fine, or if advertised separately from the primary structure, isn't that operating without a license leading to a $2,500 fine after a warning? If the goal is to have VHRs and operations inspected for safety and compliance, isn't education, warning, and existing fines enough? And with exception, one change that I would like to see the Planning Commission consider would be relating to lighting standards. Unlike the general public, VHRs are cited for non-compliance of lighting standards. While the lighting ordinance has gone over at length, like 3 slides length, during the Good Neighbor class, shielded fixtures are currently not a requirement on a VHR license issue or renewal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Cindy Bernard.
Yeah, overall, I agree with Susan. It's really great to see this data. It seems mostly really well organized. I had a really hard time with the way the chart was organized, and I would just ask if we're going to do a chart like this that you include the addresses, because so for instance, the first time I looked at it, I absolutely could not find my complaint on the chart because I was curious to see, you know, if it was there, of course. And then the second time through, I did find it, and it's because the date on the complaint was 7 months different than the complaint date, and it was just really difficult. So just organizationally, I think a chart like this is really useful once in a while, but it was really hard to find information on it. The rest of it's very clear, though. I just wish there was a way to deal with, and this is just not about this necessarily, but generally the problem of not having a map that the city produces, so that if someone has something that they feel they want to complain about, that there's a place they can go and get the phone number other than the map that's produced by 29 Palms Neighbors. I wish the city would just get their own map together with information on the VHRs, so that it makes it easier for everybody to locate what potential issues are. I had a question about how things landed on the database chart. For instance, I was wondering if sheriff's reports were included, if they did not have any other kind of report, because sometimes the reporting to the citizen serve it works better than it used to, but the security detail, it's kind of hard to know what's happening with that sometimes. In my specific incidents, and Chris and I had very heated conversation. I had a very heated conversation with Chris about this. You know, some kinds of violations are really difficult to deal with. Like in my case, they were ORVs. The VHR had cameras. They could see that ORVs were going in and out of their property. I tried talking to that person. Went over there, called them. The person didn't speak English. I could not get across to them what was going on their property. I called the sheriff. I got a sheriff's report. It was both an ORV complaint and a noise complaint, actually, because Ian Rackow, who lived on the other side of the property, was just complaining at the level of noise. He had to leave his home. He couldn't take it anymore. And this became a non-actionable, I think it was non-actionable complaint, because there was no way to take action on something because they were ORVs. But I just wish there was a way to deal with that kind of activity when it's coming out of a VHR. And when it's coming out of anything, but especially when it's coming out of VHR. It's a very hard thing to control, and I understand that. But that was my complaint. That was my problem. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Okay, any more comments from the audience? Then I'll close public comment. And I'll return it up here to further commission discussion. Questions or concerns or recommendations?
You had two questions.
Yeah, I think you've answered the first one.
Yeah, we like it.
The first one is having and we like that as well, in case something comes up that we didn't anticipate, we can add it, as opposed to going through an ordinance amendment to go through that process. So, so the second question is, if we go down this path, this chart that we've put together as a working list, is there anything at this point that the commission would like to see added, moved, deleted, clarified?
Well, am I reading it correctly about I've got the date the issue date of the VHR license, right?
Are you looking at?
I'm looking at the chart.
Okay.
I have a question. Okay, so we have the VHR license number, and it says issue date. That was the date that the VHR license was issued. And then when we have the case number, I've got 21, that's got to be the year, 0013. So I don't know the date
That's
I
not the date.
don't have, huh?
That's not a date.
I know that's not a date, but I don't have a date. Or were these all on the?
The dates are at the end, at the very end of that, at the very final.
Well, so on the one I'm particularly looking at, it comes down, it says, parties loud music, non-actionable, closed, and it doesn't have a date next to date. So when it doesn't have a date next to,
That's because when the information was imported from whatever they were using previously into Citizen Serve, that was in part of it.
okay.
Or it was in the wrong.
Well, the only thing I would recommend, I like having tangible data, and
We can't go back to that.
I understand. In the future, I think having the date
Right.
would be helpful.
The date that the violation happened.
Yeah, the date that the violation happened, that would be
And a lot of
helpful.
times we don't have a date of the violation because people just complain, they'll complain on a Monday.
Oh,
and they'll
okay.
say it was 2 Sundays ago or maybe a Sunday, and that complaint won't have an actual date of whatever the incident happened because they don't.
Okay.
What is considered the leasing activities?
I'm sorry?
It says leasing activities. And under revoke?
Okay, so that is, okay, so leasing activities that contradicts the permit. So, if they're leasing out,
An RV in the backyard.
an RV in the backyard, or if they have a ADU that wasn't part of the original approval, or, you know,
So I
or
feel like
camping in the back,
they all
in
go
the background,
together.
or in the backyard or something. I'm sorry?
Well, I feel like I mean, the non-compliance of, if you have conditions, plus, I feel like there's all landing in the similar, the same.
Yeah, the only difference is
Mhm.
if the leasing activity is that they knowingly actually did it purposely. For instance, when they do advertise it and they say, hey, you could come and stay, and we have 7 bedrooms, when the house was only permitted for 4. And we do understand you're allowed 2 additional people, but when you add an extra room, that adds an additional 2 people to your count, which causes problems. So
Okay.
whenever they do anything that they're purposely advertising for it and leasing it, or leasing multiple houses at the same time as a party house, or an unpermitted ADU, or they converted a garage and now they use it, those kind of things.
Yeah.
I guess it's just,
I think,
yeah, no, there's the advertising, there's inaccurate advertising, there's a non-compliance with conditions, right? So how does the leasing activities
It-
differ from the non-compliance with conditions?
It's very similar. I mean, it's on along, to your point, it's along the same vein.
Okay,
So,
I just make sure I understand
Yeah.
what the difference is.
I would add, I like the tack that you're taking with the administrative, and I would look at anybody who's added like 3 bedrooms to that's automatic revocation. Unpermitted
mhm.
additions is automatic revocation. I would go for, I mean,
I guess
That's-
maybe to further this thought is just like fines, but then how many fines? Like, what are we're just gonna keep fining them and they're gonna keep paying it, or we're gonna
don't-
hit like a certain threshold and then you're revoked or suspended, or?
Doesn't the ordinance
Yeah.
now spell out
I
that
don't have it in front of me.
Well,
so-
this is,
2 or more fines in a 12-month period?
It doesn't get into that amount of detail. Is it 3? Then I sit corrected.
Yeah, I mean, it was supposed to, when we did the study group to do the changes, it came up with,
There
at a
was a
certain-
revocation in there, yeah.
there
But
was revocation in there, but it was also fines at a certain amount of fines for the same thing in a 12-month period equaled suspension or revocation.
so is this gonna be in the admin policy or admin policy takes over and removes?
We would remove the detailed amount of fines. And one of the things that's just one of my professional bugaboos is having dollar amounts in our development code, because dollars change over time. I mean,
Yeah.
inflation goes up and.
But the
things like
admin
that.
policy would have that covered and subject to change or
Mhm.
adaptations?
Right,
Okay.
Can you go back to the admin policy real quick, Keith?
yeah.
For fines and suspension and revocation, we should put some clarification in there that unless we're gonna start fining the guests that had the violations, because we're not gonna hunt down the guest who stayed in vacation home
Right.
100
Mm-hmm.
and fine
No, it-
them for a party they had last
The
Friday.
host is responsible.
We're-
It gets-
right, so
it
we
goes
need
to
that,
the
but
host.
clarification that, because some hosts might say, oh, well, the guest did it, you're gonna fine the guest, not me.
Right.
Nope, they're gonna say, you're responsible.
Right, but some clarification, so they can't say, no, this says this is a guest control thing, you're gonna fine the guest, not me.
Responsibility? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can put language like that in there.
Yeah, could you go back to can you find I don't have the VHR ordinance in front of me, but I want to.
Right, but this is, so we're gonna bring the VHR policy back, and that we'll have the suggested removal and that to see the admin policy, correct?
Yes, that was the intent. So
Okay.
this is the way it's shown now. Just go down.
So we all said we liked your admin, but then we're confusing ourselves with, we're trying to say we're going the route of the admin versus having those strict terms written in the code. It'll be applied as the admin. Is that what everybody's understanding as well?
So the goal is to find out if you want to go in this direction, not the specifics.
Well, yeah, so generally, yeah, do we want to go down this direction of Oh, it does say first, second, third violation. These are very explicit on dollar amounts. If operating without a license, and there's disturbances here, you know,
It's left to interpretation. It's explicit, but it's left to interpretation in some areas.
in
So
some
if we
areas.
remove this and go with the admin policy that is available to the public, it is more beneficial for us to enforce the violations.
It's more beneficial for adapting quick changes or
Yes.
additions to things.
As well as,
Like
yes.
there's a trend of people not taking their trash out, taking the trash out of the wrong day, or a trend of there being excessive trash. We could make that a separate fine in itself to alleviate that trend.
Well, I'm going to see, I mean, I remember when we put this in there, they gave you the authority
Mhm.
to suspend a license based upon and you now want to, I'm not following you on fee, excuse me, let me get this up. Just to be sure, you want to pull these dollar numbers out and have those administered how?
Through
that
the
what you're saying?
admin
Through-
policy.
through the admin-
You want to move
through-
that to the admin policy
through-
and
Right.
then
So
they'll
this
be
whole section-
specified in the admin policy or?
Right, we can be as detailed as we wish to be in the admin policy.
Okay,
So, in essence, the penalties section would go away, and it would say, you know, please see
the admin policy.
please see admin policy.
But do you still have the authority to suspend the license?
Mhm.
Yeah, I want to keep that in there.
Yeah.
Okay. What leads to revocation? Go to that part.
As we've written
Just you?
now,
No. In the existing one. That can be you, except I don't see that. You can suspend the vacation home rental license for a specific time not to exceed 12 months. But we don't, okay. The owner can appeal this decision as advertised revocation hearing, revocation or modification. Does this insinuate that you can do a revocation of the license? I don't see,
you know, it's,
Depending on how many violations would allow that. The owner can appeal it and that would go straight to the next level.
anything I
body.
decide would go to the planning commission on appeal.
you see, it's
Yeah,
up here, it
that's only
says as one
suspension.
steps towards revocation, and it goes, okay,
It's-
so how?
It's right here, it's, we may
Suspend.
suspend, but there's no revocation.
Yeah, there's no revocation.
Mhm.
So you need that in there.
Because the revocation
'Cause-
came to the planning commissioners.
Because right now we have, okay, may include more than one violation, but shall only count as one step towards revocation. So what is revocation?
He could suspend and say, all right, we need to have a meeting with the next body,
Well,
which
this
would be
is-
us.
And this is what, the struggle we've been dealing with on
Yeah.
on this part of
We
the
mentioned
development code.
revocation, but then there's no, okay. Yeah,
So this is why we think a little bit more flexible administrative
Okay.
policy is more appropriate than how it's written now.
Yeah.
But want to get that feedback before we went down this path.
okay. Well, this is an informational discussion, I got it, and, does anybody else have any questions for? Do you have enough guidance to move forward? Okay. Then we're good. Now let's move to the next one.
Mhm.
Do we have any study sessions?
Nope.
And no study sessions, then I go ahead and I adjourn today's meeting.
The next date is March the 19th, remember?
Okay, March the 19th is the next date. And we are adjourned.